Thank you for taking the time to attend this afternoon's webinar on managed services for the Infor Cloud. And with that, I give you Ken Stout.
Right.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Keith.
All right, so we're going to review why you should consider managed services even if you're in the Infor Cloud.
Is everybody watching the webinar on the Infor Cloud today? All right, great, great. Or those not, you're considering? Okay. Great, so before we get started, who's RPI? We are RPI and we have all the cloud experience. We were one of the, maybe the first partner to bring a Lawson healthcare organization live in Infor Cloud version 10. We have completed cloud migration projects in every possible version and deployment scenario, including Cloud Suite Financials multi-tenant. And obviously, for those organizations we've helped bring to the cloud and implement in the cloud, we have a pretty good understanding what the client responsibilities are and how we can help round out the client's overall interaction with the cloud for a successful relationship.
Very good. All right, so we covered this slide in the previous session. I know a lot of you are repeat visitors, but pretty much the managed services, basically clients will outsource management and functional responsibilities for certain IT services to allow a provider to improve operations of the service, improving uptime, lowering operational costs, so that you can leverage your internal resources on other initiatives. So the customers in the Infor Cloud, there's a number of flavors. We have folks that are on the LSF 10.0 single tenant, which is on the Windows 2008 platform. And just so you're aware, you should be thinking about migrating to 10.1 fairly shortly, because Windows 2008 is no longer supported as of January next year. Mm-hmm. So we can certainly help in that regard.
Yeah, the Infor Cloud comes in a sort of variety of different deployments, and there's differences here in terms of what you get, what are the client responsibilities. So I don't think we have to dive into everyone, but one of the parts of being on a cloud system or a hosted system is that occasionally the underlying infrastructure of that system needs to change, and that requires some testing on the client side. That requires bringing over customizations. It requires sort of organizing a project around getting through that change without issue, and that's something that we have helped a lot of clients work through recently, and will be helping as we see the wave of Windows 2008 retirements through the end of this year. Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to call out a couple of documents that you'll find out on Infor Concierge or the Infor Support Portal under Resources. So if you are a Cloud Suite customer right now, Infor Subscription Services Guide is a very good document to read through if you haven't. Basically, it has information about the services you receive as an Infor Cloud Suite customer. So they review things like support, the 24/7 access to the Infor Concierge, how you get updated software updates when they become GA, any fixes, the critical updates that come out on a monthly basis and so forth. The infrastructure, so that's basically power, pipe, and ping for you data center folks. Basically, you're provided all the infrastructure for your application environments to reside on. High availability in DR, so that's basically the architecture of your application environment. It's highly redundant and to meet the uptime SLAs, and then also meets RTO and RPO, so that's recovery time objective and recovery point objective in terms of how quickly can they get the environment back up and running for you, and at what point in time can they restore the data. So how much data do you lose if you have a disaster, in essence. And then security, very multi-layered. You have security at the network level, at the hardware infrastructure level, and at application level, and they go into detail about that. Technical change management, so when they have to take the system to apply some updates and all that, what's the process for that? How do they communicate with you? And then the scheduled maintenance, so when do they take the system, when they schedule that maintenance for updates and so forth. And then these are the services they get into. So obviously when you first migrate to the cloud, they're provisioning an environment for you. But after that, once you're live, you have administration that they provide, patch management, the application updates and upgrades. They manage your database for you. They monitor performance. They help with the backup archiving, and they perform proactive health checks. The other document I want to call your attention to, and again, it's on Infor Concierge and also in Infor Support Portal under Resources, is the Infor Support Operations. So that's when you submit a ticket and what's their process for that. So they review how you submit a ticket. They review, okay, what happens after that ticket is submitted. They qualify the issue coming in, so they gather some info and define what the issue is. And then they get into their approach of either researching the issue, determining what it is, doing some testing in their environment, see if they can repeat the issue, and then come to a resolution. And then they also define severity levels. So in the ticketing system, depending on the impact, as we discussed in the other session, the impact and the urgency of the ticket, they will assign a certain severity level to that issue that you submit. And then they review escalation management, support scope, so what's covered under that agreement, the SLAs and the various support plans that they have that you can sign up for. And they're all documented right in there. Along with, they also provide, which is pretty good for premise folks, guidelines on how to get optimal support from Infor. So, how do you set up your environment so they can easily access it when they need to address issues. So that's all that Infor does within the Cloud Suite, all the services they provide. The customer has some roles and responsibilities. So we've got them listed here. So basically anything related to extensions, configurations, add-ons to the environment, that's all on the customer.
Right.
All right. End user training. Infor, I would assume, would provide training at a cost, but they expect you to provide your end users training. Functional testing of fixes and patches and upgrades. So we were talking about the different types of environments. So I would think in a loss in system environment, you may have a CTP you have to apply. So it's unlike the Cloud Suite products. You have to apply a patch. So what's the process for that? Well, they'll apply it and test if you submit a request to apply the patch. And then it has to be tested. And then once you're done with your testing and you find that it's working as expected, you have to submit another request to promote it to production. So those are things that Infor is going to require you to do. Creation and management of users in Infor Extreme Portal. So for portal support, you have to create those users. First level user support. So basically, a user will come to you with an issue, and Infor is expecting you to at least take a look at it, see if you can resolve it. If not, then you would submit the ticket to Infor Concierge. And request and approve changes to the environment. So any changes to your environment you have to submit another request. And I believe it's the Cloud Suite portal, they call it, where you would submit requests like that for updates. So you would have to manage that process for changes in your environment. And then management of application environment data, that's like printer definitions,
Right.
job queues, anything of that nature, within the environment, you're responsible for that. And then, just the management and authorization of users. So provisioning users, ADFS,
Yeah.
getting them set up there.
The whole security
The whole
model,
security model.
roles and classes.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So, how can a managed services provider help
Yeah.
with
well,
all that?
I
right?
mean, I heard a pretty good amount of client responsibility
Yeah.
there, and I heard that the way that you might interact with a cloud provider would be making very specific requests at different points, but it's sort of up to the client to have that general oversight or project management to see an initiative through from beginning to end, including wholly client responsible portions of getting that initiative accomplished that might not even involve the cloud provider.
Right. So the first one we just talked about was security. So you could certainly have a provider help you out, especially with maintaining security for users. So you maybe have a newly onboarded person, and you need to get them configured so they have access to the various applications, within the environment. And so that's something a provider can certainly help with. Custom roles, Cloud Suite with all the role the portal pages for a certain role. Those can certainly be customized.
Sure.
Stuff like that.
And they require general maintenance as
Yeah.
you get application upgrades that impacts your security model.
Yeah. And then I just have various examples here: Infor BI, MSCM, global HR, configuring our QC requesters as
Yeah.
they get onboarded.
I think we can see here that the Lawson solution has a pretty complex and disparate security model. Sort of because each of these little pieces of functionality or components of the system maybe
Right.
have a unique way of managing security. So it really does require a security lead or a security administrator for Infor Lawson to take charge of this. This is easily something that can be outsourced to a managed services provider. Even look at the top one, the general provisioning, creating, and then terminating users. Ideally, we would look to automate as much of that as possible, but with Lawson 10, the automation doesn't come out of the box, so it's something that needs to be built, and then an exception management process needs to be put in place to deal with anything the automation can't handle.
Right. And then advanced troubleshooting. So if you have an issue that you can't address internally, perhaps rather than submitting a ticket in Infor Concierge, you could go to a provider that has a lot of knowledge of your environment and the applications where you're having the issue, and have us or have a provider take a look at that and try to resolve it. And if we find that it requires either a fix, a patch, or whatever, then that could be entered into Infor Concierge as a ticket, and we could kind of manage that process throughout. So, you submit a ticket, there's always going to be follow-up with the person who's assigned to that ticket, and you're managing that all the way through the process of finally getting the fix applied or promoted to production. So rather than you getting involved with all that, because it takes time, you could have your managed services provider manage that for you.
Yeah, because just opening a support case for an issue maybe is just the first step, because if the response back is, oh yeah, we've solved that in an application patch, at that point you need to plan out getting the patch applied in test, which requires a request, making sure that the right people are testing it and you're ensuring that the patch does in fact resolve the issue, or maybe not, in which case maybe you want to back it out, which requires another request. And then if your testing is successful, opening a request to, during that next prod maintenance window, get that patch applied in prod.
Right.
So sort of that hand-holding and project management is definitely something a managed services provider can come in and just sort of take off your plate.
And there's other issues that may come up, like in process automation, work units failing, and the ability to go in and actually troubleshoot and determine where that failure occurred may not necessarily be something you would submit to Infor to resolve, but you have something with somebody with subject matter expertise with the tool.
Because generally they don't dive into customer-developed IPA flows to do a lot of troubleshooting there. They're going to focus their troubleshooting on, is the application up in general?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And then plenty of options for functional support. So in terms of ongoing customer-specific business process guidance, if you have, how-to questions, or, you have this business process that you need to, how do I get this into Infor? How do I work through that? That's the type of stuff that we could review with you. We talked a little bit before about, testing of fixes or patches that, we could build test scripts for you for those particular processes, help you with the testing, to determine if the fix actually corrected. Especially you'll get a fix. We've had this happen where you get a fix, supposed to fix the issue. You go in, you do apply it, you do a unit test, and it doesn't fix it, right? So why would you want to get involved with that process, right? We could certainly help there. And once we determined, yes, in our eyes, it looks like it addressed the issue, then we can go to the user acceptance testing portion, so you're not wasting time, but you're confirming that the fix happened, corrected the issue, and then you move forward. Infor BI and Burst dashboarding reporting, we can certainly help out with. I know a lot happens with ESS customizations with the folks that are still on 10. You have an open enrollment, and then you have some new requirements that you have to make some updates to. That's something we could certainly help out with. The BSI updates, the normal stuff there, and training. I know Infor has it that they expect the customers to provide the user training. That's something we can help out with. And then we talked about the workflows and integrations and all that, all of the extensions. We could support that. So if, your favorite example is the rec approval. So you need a new level to that rec approval. I have to, make an update to this flow. That's stuff we could do.
Yeah, maybe that
easily.
involves provisioning a bunch of new approvers who aren't Lawson users today, getting them trained up, getting, maybe it involves, we're expanding our use of requisitions and we need more requester records, so we need to upload that. We need to upload to the ED screens to open up procurement punch out to those users, right? It's like the whole package. And I just think that's just not the place of a cloud provider to have to handhold a client through what all the different pieces of configuration are to expand use of the system. So it's certainly something that a managed services provider would be well suited to do.
Change benefit providers. So I have a new interface I have to put together. Stuff like that. And then in general, data migration, so administration stuff, integration assistance, management of the application environment. Again, we were talking about earlier about printer definitions, distribution groups, stuff like that. Monitoring the job queue. If there's failures, we can help out with job failures throughout. And we talked about rights management a number of times.
Yeah.
So.
I think well, we could sum this up is by saying like systems in the cloud, they don't just administer themselves, right? I mean, I think that's a real myth of cloud-based systems is that, oh, I can get rid of my administrative staff as long as I move to the cloud. You know, those of you that are out there that are live on the cloud today, you understand that it still takes a lot of time and effort to keep the system running well and meeting the needs of your business users. It still requires a great breadth of knowledge with application knowledge and technical knowledge, and there's a lot of opportunity there in terms of keeping the system aligned, enhancing, improving the use of the system. And that's where a firm such as RPI, I think, has a lot to offer the client base out there on Infor Cloud. And we certainly have those of our clients that are leveraging us for that purpose, I think would back us up there.